I never thought a storm warning would land me in the middle of a lighthouse, sharing a cramped kitchen with a guy I'd just met, but here we are. It started as one of those typical, let me tell you about this weird thing that happened to me stories. But honestly, I'm still figuring out how it even turned into a story worth telling. So I was supposed to be on a quick weekend trip to the coast. To clear my head, really. Work had been a pressure cooker lately, and I thought some sea air might do me good. I rented this tiny cabin near a little town with one main street, a coffee shop, and, of course, a lighthouse perched on a cliff overlooking the choppy ocean. Nothing fancy, just a spot to get away from emails and endless Zoom calls. The day I arrived, the sky was a confusing mix of bright sun and heavy clouds, like the weather was arguing with itself. I figured I'd do some hiking around the cliffs, maybe take some pictures, and grab dinner at the local diner. That's when I first saw him, standing on the lighthouse steps, looking out at the water with this calm, steady air. I don't know what made me walk over, but I guess I was drawn to the place, and maybe to the quiet confidence in the way he stood there. His name was Sam. He was volunteering at the Lighthouse, he said, part of a preservation group that kept the place running and welcomed visitors. He had this easy smile and a voice that didn't match the rugged look, more like someone who read a lot and thought carefully before talking. Sam invited me inside to see the lighthouse up close. I expected a quick tour and then back to my plans, but that's when the weather decided to go from moody to threatening. The storm warning came over the radio just as we reached the top of the lighthouse. Apparently, a fast-moving front was headed right for the coast, bringing heavy rain and wind strong enough to knock over trees. The last ferry out had already left, and the road back to my cabin was likely to be closed soon. I was supposed to be out here alone, but now, stranded, and with Sam offering me a spot to ride out the storm, I found myself saying yes. We settled into the small volunteers' quarters at the base of the lighthouse, the kind of place where the walls felt thick enough to keep the world out, but thin enough that every creak and groan of the building was amplified. The storm was coming, and with it, a night I never expected, one that would change how I saw everything, including Sam, but that's jumping ahead. At the moment, the wind was just starting to pick up outside, and Sam handed me a cup of tea with that same calm smile. "Looks like you're stuck with me for a while," he said. And honestly, I wasn't mad about that. I took the cup from him, feeling the warmth seep through my fingers. The tea was surprisingly good, herbal, with a hint of something I couldn't place. Maybe lavender? Sam must have brought it from the town's little market, or maybe he had some stash for nights like this. I didn't ask. There was something about the way he handed it over, like he was offering more than just a drink, like it was a lifeline, a small comfort against the storm brewing outside. "So how'd you end up volunteering at a lighthouse?" I asked, settling onto a creaky wooden chair that looked like it had seen better days. Sam shrugged, his easy smile fading just a bit. "It's kind of a long story. I needed a break from the city, and this place has history. Plus, there's something grounding about being near the water. The lighthouse keeps things steady, even when everything else is wild. I guess I wanted some of that." I nodded, understanding more than I expected. I'd come out here for the same reason, trying to find some kind of steady when my own world was spinning too fast. The wind outside was picking up, rattling the windows and making the old building groan like it was alive. The lights flickered for a second, and I caught myself glancing toward the small emergency lamp mounted near the door. "So what's the plan when the storm hits?" I asked, half joking but also curious. Sam's eyes met mine, calm and steady, but I could see the seriousness there. "We wait it out. The lighthouse is built to handle this kind of weather. I've been through a few storms here. Worst part is the silence in between, when you're just waiting for the next blast." I imagined that, the waiting, the quiet stretching out before the chaos. It sounded a little like life lately. Long stretches of uncertainty, punctuated by moments where everything shifted. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his hands together as if trying to chase away an invisible chill. "You're lucky you showed up when you did. I was just about to lock up and head home." I laughed. "Lucky me, huh?" Though I'm not sure I'd call being stuck in a storm lucky. Sam smiled again, a genuine one this time, that made my stomach do a weird flip. Maybe not, but sometimes the storm brings something unexpected. I found myself watching him more closely, noticing the way the dim light caught the lines around his eyes, the way his hair felt just a little messy over his forehead. There was something magnetic about him, something that made me want to ask more, but I didn't want to push too fast. The power went out just then, plunging us into a dim yellow glow from a single lantern Sam lit. The shadows danced on the walls, and the wind's howl outside filled the quiet spaces between us. Want me to show you around the lighthouse? It's safer to be moving than sitting still when the power's out, Sam offered. I nodded, standing up and brushing off my jeans. The air smelled like salt and wet stone, cool and sharp. He led me through a narrow hallway, lined with old photographs and maritime memorabilia. I noticed a few pictures of the lighthouse in calmer days. Sailboats gliding by, families visiting. There was a kind of peacefulness in those images that felt distant from the storm we were about to face. At the top, the main room with the massive light and the thick glass windows gave us a panoramic view of the ocean. The waves were already rough, crashing against the rocks in a frenzy. Sam pulled a chair close to the window. This is where I come when the storm's at its worst. Watching the ocean is kind of hypnotic. You can't control it, but you can respect it. I sat down beside him, feeling the heat from the lantern and the chill from the encroaching storm mix in the air. Ever been in a storm like this before? I asked, my voice a little quieter. He shrugged again, but there was a hint of something in his eyes. Maybe a memory. A few, but every storm's different. You learn to listen to it. The wind, the waves, they tell you what's coming. We sat together in silence, the sound of the storm growing louder, but inside the lighthouse, there was this strange bubble of calm between us. I found myself wanting to break the silence, but unsure how. So, what about you? Sam asked finally, looking at me with that same steady gaze. What brought you here, really? I thought about the stress at work, the endless grind, the feeling that I'd lost something but wasn't sure what. Honestly, I needed to get away from everything, to figure out if I even wanted to keep doing what I'm doing. He nodded, like he understood exactly what I meant. Sometimes you need the storm to shake things up, to see what's still standing when it's over. The wind outside suddenly slammed against the lighthouse, making the whole building shudder. I jumped a little, and Sam chuckled softly. See, it's not subtle. I smiled, feeling the tension ease out of my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, maybe months, I felt like I wasn't alone. The storm was coming, no doubt about that. But for now, I was here, with Sam in this lighthouse, riding it out, and somehow, that felt like exactly where I was supposed to be. We stayed up there for a while longer, watching the storm grow louder and the waves slam higher against the cliffs. The kind of sound that settles in your chest, heavy and relentless. I found myself stealing glances at Sam, noticing how calm he was, even as the wind rattled the windows, like someone was trying to shake the whole lighthouse loose. Eventually, the cold started creeping in. Not just outside, but inside too. Old buildings like this aren't exactly built for comfort. Sam must have noticed because he stood and stretched with a small grin. Come on, I'll show you the quarters where we're bunking down. It's not much, but it'll keep you dry. I followed him down the narrow spiral staircase, every step creaking underfoot like the whole place was groaning in protest. The volunteers' quarters were small, just one room with 2 beds shoved into opposite corners, a tiny kitchenette, and a table cluttered with weather reports and notebooks. Make yourself at home, Sam said, pulling open a cabinet and grabbing a blanket. He tossed it over his bed and then settled on the edge of his own. I'm not exactly a hotel, but I can make some coffee if you want. Or more tea. Coffee sounded like exactly what I needed to keep me from feeling like the storm was swallowing me whole, so I nodded. While he fiddled with the old coffee maker, I scanned the room more carefully. There were photos taped to the walls, pictures of the lighthouse through the seasons, some with Sam in them, smiling with other volunteers. A calendar with hand-drawn notes marked weather patterns and maintenance schedules. It looked like Sam had made this place his life for now. "So you've been here long?" I asked, hoping to fill the silence. "Long enough to know the ropes," he said, pouring 2 mugs. "About 6 months. It's a good break from the city. My apartment in town feels like a different life." I took the mug and lifted it slowly, the smell rich and comforting. 6 months, huh? That's a decent commitment." "Yeah," he said, sitting back down. "Sometimes I wonder if I got stuck here on purpose." "Why's that?" I asked, curious. He shrugged like it was no big deal, but I caught a flicker of something in his eyes, something quieter and maybe a little sad. Guess I needed to slow down, figure out what I'm doing. Life can get messy. The lighthouse keeps me honest. I nodded, feeling like I was starting to understand him a little better. There was a weight he carried, but also a kind of peace I didn't know how to explain. The storm was raging now. The wind howled like a living thing, and the rain slammed against the windows in sheets. From where I sat, the lighthouse seemed almost heroic, standing firm against the assault. Sam leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "You ever think about what it means to be safe? Like, really safe?" I blinked, caught off guard by the question. "I guess. But I'm not sure I know what that even means anymore." "Me neither," he said softly. "Sometimes I think being safe isn't about where you are. It's who you're with." The room felt warmer suddenly, like the storm outside had softened just a little. I found myself looking at him in a way I hadn't before, really seeing him not just as the calm guy in the lighthouse, but as someone who might understand what it's like to feel lost and found at the same time. There was a long pause, and then Sam smiled, a small, genuine smile that made my heart skip. "Sorry, that got a little heavy." "No, it's good," I said, surprising myself. I think I needed to hear that. We drank our coffee in silence after that, the storm still pounding, but the room holding a quiet kind of shelter. Later, when the wind finally lulled enough to open the door without it slamming shut, Sam stood and stretched again. "I'm going to check the equipment one more time." "Want to come?" I hesitated, but the idea of wandering out into the storm with him, even for a moment, felt strangely right. We stepped outside together, rain pelting our faces and the wind tugging at our jackets. The lighthouse light spun overhead, a beacon slicing through the gray. Sam moved with a confidence that made me feel like this storm was something he could tame, or at least understand in a way I couldn't. We reached the little shed where the backup generators were housed, and Sam flipped switches, muttering to himself like he was calming a restless animal. "Feels like this storm's been waiting to hit," I said, trying to match his calm. "Yeah," he agreed. "But there's always a calm after. You just have to hold on long enough to see it." I looked over at him, thinking about the strange night, this stranger who'd invited me in when all I wanted was to be alone. And yet, here I was, feeling less alone than I had in a long time. "Thanks for letting me stay," I said quietly. Sam looked at me, and there was something in his eyes, maybe something like hope. "Anytime. You're welcome here, whenever you want." The storm still raged, but in that moment, it felt like the lighthouse wasn't just a building on a cliff. It was a place where 2 people could find something steady, something real, and maybe, just maybe, that was all either of us really needed. We stood there for a moment longer in the rain-soaked night, the lighthouse beam cutting through the storm's darkness, the sound of water roaring all around us. The cold rain had soaked through my jacket, and yet the air between us felt anything but chilly. Sam turned toward me with that faint smile again, the one that made me think maybe storms weren't just about weather, they could be about people too, messy and unpredictable, but somehow worth weathering through. "Come on," he said after a beat, grabbing my arm gently and pulling me back toward the lighthouse entrance. "Let's get back inside before the wind decides to throw us into the ocean." Inside, the warmth hit me like a wave. Sam flicked on a few lanterns, and the soft glow filled the volunteers' quarters, chasing away the shadows. He peeled off his wet jacket and tossed it over a chair, then looked at me with a playful glint in his eyes. "You're braver than I thought, coming out there with me," he said. I shrugged, drying my hair a little with my hands. Maybe I'm crazier. Or maybe I just like spending time with you. Saying it out loud felt weird and a little thrilling. Sam's smile widened, and for a moment, it was like the whole storm had faded away, leaving just the two of us in this cramped, cozy room. I found myself wanting to say more, to tell him about the nights I spent staring at my phone, pretending I wasn't lonely, or how I'd been avoiding real connections for years because I was scared they'd slip away. But the words caught in my throat. Instead, I settled onto the bed across from his, feeling the tiredness from the storm and the day squeeze into my limbs. Sam stood by the window, looking out at the rain still hammering the glass. You ever think about what comes after all this? I asked quietly, nodding toward the storm. He turned, eyes thoughtful. All the time. Storms end. But what comes next isn't always what you expect. I smiled, feeling a little braver. I guess that's why sometimes getting caught in one isn't the worst thing. He laughed softly, sitting down beside me. Exactly. Sometimes the chaos forces you to slow down, to see things clearly. For the first time that night, I let myself lean a little closer, the space between us shrinking until our knees touched. The storm outside felt distant, like a background hum to something more immediate. His eyes met mine, steady and warm. You're not thinking about kissing me, are you? Sam said, eyebrows raised but no real surprise in his voice. I grinned, heart pounding. Maybe I am. He didn't pull away. Instead, he reached out, his hand brushing against mine. It was that simple, that natural. The storm was still raging, but in that moment, nothing else mattered. We stayed like that for a while, just holding hands and watching the rain fall in sheets. The storm wasn't just outside anymore. It was inside us, shaking loose old fears and lighting something new. Later, when the wind finally started to quiet, Sam pulled me toward the small kitchen nook. Want to help me make something to eat? I promise I'm a better cook than I am a weather forecaster. I laughed, standing up with him. I'm in. As we chopped and stirred and joked about everything and nothing, the room felt like a refuge, a place where the storm couldn't touch us. I caught myself stealing glances at Sam, noticing the way his eyes crinkled when he laughed, the easy way he moved around the small space. After dinner, we settled back into the living area, more comfortable now, like we'd known each other longer than just a few hours. The power hadn't come back yet, but with the lanterns and the storm's fading roar, the silence felt peaceful. Sam pulled out a worn paperback from a shelf, flipping through it until he found a page. Want me to read to you? It's an old maritime poem, kind of fitting. I nodded, already feeling the weight of sleep pressing down on me. His voice was steady and calm, weaving through the words like the lighthouse beam cutting through fog. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash over me, the storm outside finally settling into a quiet rhythm. When he finished, I opened my eyes and found him watching me, his expression soft. Thanks for letting me stay, I said again, meaning it more than I'd ever managed to say. He shrugged, but there was a shy smile there. I'm glad you did. That night, as I lay on the small bed, the storm finally passing into memory, I realized something had shifted, not just in the weather, but in me. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I could face whatever came next. Because sometimes, when the world feels like it's breaking apart, it's the unexpected places and unexpected people that hold you together. And maybe, just maybe, the lighthouse wasn't just a beacon for ships lost at sea. Maybe it was a beacon for people too, people like me and Sam. People who found each other when the storm hit hardest. I didn't know what the morning would bring, but as sleep finally claimed me, I knew I wasn't alone anymore. And somehow, that felt like the beginning of everything. Morning came on soft feet, like the world was trying not to wake me too harshly after the storm. The rain had finally stopped sometime in the night, leaving behind a quiet calm that felt almost foreign after the chaos. I blinked a few times, the small volunteers' quarters still dim in the early light filtering through the curtains. Sam was already up. I heard the gentle clinking of dishes from the kitchenette and the low hum of the radio, which was thankfully back on. I sat up, stretching out the stiffness from sleeping in a bed that seemed way too short for me, and pulled on a sweatshirt. When I stepped into the kitchen, Sam looked up from the stove and gave me that same easy smile. Morning. Coffee's brewing. I poured myself a cup, grateful for the warmth. The rain outside had left everything looking washed out and fresh, the kind of glow that makes you feel like anything could happen. I stepped closer to the window, watching the ocean still churning but calmer, the lighthouse standing tall and proud. "So what's the plan now?" I asked, turning back to Sam. He shrugged, leaning against the counter. "The storm's passed, but the roads might still be closed for a bit. I was thinking maybe you stick around a little longer. I mean, if you want to." I hesitated for a second, my mind flickering between the freedom I'd been craving and the unexpected pull I felt toward this place, and him. "I was just supposed to be here for the weekend," I said, "but honestly, I can't think of a better way to spend a few extra days." His smile widened, and suddenly the room felt warmer, lighter. "Good, because I was hoping you'd say that." We talked over breakfast, swapping stories about our lives outside the lighthouse. Sam told me about the city he left behind, the noise, the pressure, the things that made him feel boxed in. I shared bits of my own story, the burnout, the loneliness, the way I'd been running in circles without really going anywhere. There was something comforting about opening up to him, like the storm had stripped away the usual defenses I carried around. Maybe it was the isolation, the way the lighthouse created its own little world, or maybe it was just Sam. Either way, I didn't feel the need to hold back. After breakfast, we decided to explore the coastline together. The storm had carved new shapes into the rocks, and the fresh air was sharp and invigorating. We walked side by side, the silence between us easy, filled with the sound of waves crashing and our footsteps on the wet sand. At one point, Sam stopped and pointed to a small tide pool, brimming with tiny crabs and anemones. "I love this part of the coast. It's like a whole other world if you just look close enough." I smiled, crouching down to get a better look. "You see things most people miss, huh?" He shrugged, then nudged me gently. "Maybe. Or maybe I'm just looking for the little things that aren't stormy." The way he said it made my chest tighten a little. I wanted to tell him that sometimes those little things were exactly what I was looking for too. We ended up back at the lighthouse in the late afternoon, the sun breaking through the clouds and casting golden light over everything. Sam made a joke about the storm giving us a dramatic welcome, and I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. That night, as we settled in again, the power fully restored, we cooked a simple dinner together. The kitchen filled with the smell of garlic and herbs, and the conversation flowed easily about music, books, dreams we hadn't shared with anyone else. Later, when the kitchen was tidied and the last dishes done, Sam pulled a blanket over both of us on the small couch. The way he looked at me then, soft, open, I realized I wanted more than just friendship. The storm had passed, but the feeling it stirred in me was just beginning. "Do you ever wonder if moments like this are meant to change you?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He nodded slowly. "All the time. Sometimes it takes a storm to clear the sky." I reached out and took his hand, feeling the warmth spread through me. "Maybe this is one of those moments." He squeezed my hand back, his eyes holding mine with a quiet intensity that made everything else fade away. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was exactly where I was supposed to be, safe, seen, and maybe even a little bit loved. The days that followed slipped by with a kind of gentle rhythm I hadn't known I was craving. The storm had passed, but the energy it left behind lingered, like a fresh current pulling us closer together beneath the steady gaze of the lighthouse. We fell into an easy routine. Mornings were for coffee and quiet talks, afternoons for wandering the jagged coastline or poking around the little town nearby. Evenings, though, were something else entirely. They were when the real conversations happened, the ones that made me think I was peeling back layers I'd been hiding, even from myself. One night, after dinner, we found ourselves sitting on a weathered bench just outside the lighthouse, the sky clear and studded with stars. The ocean stretched out in front of us, dark and endless, and the only sounds were the distant crash of waves and the occasional call of a night bird. "You know," Sam said, breaking the silence, "this lighthouse has seen its share of storms, some worse than the one we just weathered." I glanced over at him, curiosity piqued, but it's still standing, still shining. He pointed up to the beacon flashing above us, slicing through the night. There's something comforting about that. Like, no matter how bad things get, there's always a way forward. I nodded, feeling a lump tighten my throat. I've been running from a lot lately, trying to outrun the chaos, but it just catches up. Sam's hand found mine in the dark, fingers intertwining without a word. Maybe you don't have to run anymore. The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. I wanted to reach out, to close the gap between us, but the moment felt fragile, like a whispered secret shared between two people standing on the edge of something new. I don't know if I'm ready for that, I admitted, voice low. That's okay, he said softly. Sometimes, just knowing someone's there makes all the difference. We sat like that for a long time, hands linked, sharing the quiet and the steady pulse of the lighthouse behind us. For the first time in what felt like forever, I didn't feel invisible or alone. The next day, the sky was a clear blue, and the sun warmed the stones beneath our feet as we explored an old shipwreck site Sam had mentioned. He was animated, pointing out bits of rusted metal and worn ropes, telling me stories about the ships that had passed these waters long before I ever thought I'd find myself here. I watched him, caught by how passionate he got when talking about something he loved. It made me realize how little I'd shared about myself, my dreams, my fears, the parts one kept locked away. Later, as we sat on the beach watching the tide roll in, I found the courage to ask the question I'd been holding back. Why did you leave the city? Was it just to escape? Sam looked out at the horizon, thoughtful. Partly, but also to find something real. I was stuck in a routine that felt hollow. This place, the lighthouse, it reminded me of who I wanted to be, of what mattered. He glanced at me, eyes steady, and then you showed up. My heart skipped. Me? He shrugged with that same easy smile. Yeah, you're a storm of your own, but somehow you fit here. With the lighthouse, with me. I wanted to believe him. To believe that maybe I wasn't just a visitor in his world, but someone who belonged. That night, we stayed up late, talking until our voices were hoarse, and the moon had shifted high overhead. We shared stories of heartbreak and hope, of mistakes made and lessons learned. The walls between us crumbled, replaced by something raw and real. When the conversation finally lulled, Sam reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from my forehead. His touch was gentle, electric. I don't want this to end, he whispered. Me neither. We leaned in, the space between us closing until our lips met, soft at first, like a question posed in the dark. But then, deeper, sure, and full of promise. It was the kind of kiss that made me forget about the past, about the chaos outside, about everything except the here and now. When we pulled apart, breathless, I knew I wasn't just passing through anymore. I was home. With Sam. With the lighthouse. With whatever this was becoming. The storm had changed everything. And maybe, in the quiet aftermath, we were both ready to start something new. The days that followed felt like a kind of slow unfolding, the way sunlight spills across a room in the morning, soft but undeniable. Sam and I settled into a rhythm that wasn't about rushing or forcing things, but about simply being together. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't some whirlwind romance written in the stars, but it was real, and that was enough. One evening, as the sun was dipping low, casting the sky in shades of gold and rose, we found ourselves back on the lighthouse's porch. The air was crisp, carrying the faint scent of salt and pine. Sam reached over, his fingers brushing mine, and I squeezed gently, feeling a quiet kind of happiness settle in my chest. I never thought a storm could bring me somewhere like this, I said, voice low. He smiled, the kind that reached his eyes and softened his whole face. Sometimes, the things we resist the most are the things we need the most. We sat there, watching the light spin out over the ocean, steady and unwavering. It struck me then how much I'd changed, how the fear and restlessness had given way to something calmer, something that felt like hope. I'm not going back to the city anytime soon, I admitted. Not yet. Sam's hand found mine again, fingers intertwining like they belonged there. You don't have to go anywhere, not if you don't want to. That simple offer felt like the most generous thing anyone had given me in a long time. No pressure, no expectations, just a space to be myself. As the stars began to peek out overhead, I realized that sometimes life's storms don't just tear things apart. Sometimes they clear the way for something better, something steady, something worth holding on to. And in that moment, with Sam's hand in mine and the lighthouse keeping watch, I knew I'd found my way home.